What's up guys, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about my experience with the Canon EOS C70. I've had it for a few months now. Ever since I purchased it, I've been literally traveling across the United States with it, shooting about 20 TV shows and about 3 commercials with it now. So I've had a lot of time with this camera to tell you my experience with it and go over some of the things that I love about this camera. There's not much that I hate about it. So with that, let's get into this video. If you like videos like this, hit the subscribe button, the bell notification. It really does help. A lot of you guys that come to my channel to watch are not subscribed, which I know that's how the algorithm works, which is really nice because a lot of you guys are new. But hit the subscribe button if you end up liking this video. So with saying that, let's get into the video. Okay, so before we get too deep into this video, I want to let you guys know that everything you see in this video, every single shot, including this talking head, is shot with the C70. So I want you guys to know that. If you can, put it in 4K so you can see the quality of this video. It will help you see how good this camera actually is. So with that, let's get into everything. Let's get into my experience with this camera. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about with this camera is the low light performance. If you are watching this video and you do not own the Canon C70, you're probably gonna think it sucks in low light because it has a super 35mm. I am gonna preference this whole little segment with low light. I do have the speed booster that Canon sells for this camera, which does help with the low light performance of this camera. The C70 is phenomenal. I do own the Canon EOS R, which is full frame. You guys know that, it's full frame, and this camera way outperforms the Canon EOS R in low light. The R is not bad in low light, but the C70 is just phenomenal in low light. You don't start seeing noise until about 7,000 ISO. That's really unheard of. I mean, it's crazy how good this is in low light. It blows my mind every time I have to end up shooting in a low light scenario. So with that, I just wanted to say that. And why is it important to me whenever I'm shooting is whenever I'm running and gunning, shooting a show or whatever, the guest or the host that I'm shooting could be outside and then could all of a sudden go inside to show something, show a product, whatever, and I have to adjust to the lighting condition, and the camera has to perform and, you know, get that shot without looking all garbage. And this camera does that. It's always clean. As you see in some of this footage, it's clean footage, even indoors. Yes, there has to be a little light because you don't want the face to be all dark. It just look terrible. I mean, I do carry around a small light just to light up the face, so the face is lit. I always carry that light with me wherever I go. It's always in my back pocket just in case we do end up going indoors. So it's phenomenal. It kills the Canon R in low light, which I don't know if the Canon R was ever phenomenal in low light, but I do know the Canon R is a full frame and this is a Super 35, and the Super 35 camera murders the Canon R in low light. So the next thing I want to talk about is the audio flexibility with this camera. I shoot a lot of outdoor content, a lot of outdoor TV shows, and I use lapel microphones most of the time I'm shooting with this camera, straight into the camera with 4 separate tracks. That's one thing that I love about this camera is it has 4 separate tracks whenever you drop it into the timeline. And this camera gives you the ability to separate all 4 of those tracks to 4 different microphones. It's phenomenal. So the audio flexibility with this camera is a huge deal for anybody shooting professionally or anybody doing anything that requires run and gun, getting 3 to 4 people on one track. This camera is amazing for that. It has a 3.5mm microphone jack and then 2 mini XLR phantom powered inputs. So if the job you're working on only requires 2 microphones, you could use the other 2 channels as a safety channel, which is really nice. So if anybody gets too loud and starts clipping, you could recover it with those 2 safety channels that you created in the camera. Really simple, really easy to do, but it's nice that you have all these extra features with the Canon C70. The one thing about this camera, which this is the main reason why I'm making this video. If you don't have this camera, you're looking into buying it. This camera is a freaking workhorse. That's why I purchased it. My boss actually bought one before me. I used it for a couple weeks, seen how flexible it was, seen the resolutions it shot in, seen everything about it, seen how it has all the audio options, the HDMI. It don't have SDI, that's literally the only thing, but I use HDMI. I have a screen hooked up now. I don't use SDI, and if I wanted to use SDI, I go HDMI, and then my screen on top has an SDI. So if I really needed SDI, I could have SDI with this, you know, the monitor I have connected to the camera. This camera is legit just a workhorse. You could record for hours on end. The battery life in this camera is phenomenal. I might as well just go over the battery real quick. The battery life, I think it lasts 2.5 hours on one battery. The standard battery that came with this camera, it'll last 2.5 hours. I have 4 of them and I've never been able to use more than 3. Shoot, I don't think I've ever used more than 2 in a day. And then also if you're shooting like this right here, like I am in my room, I plug it into the power cable and it's not even using battery. It's just going off out of the wall. I do have a battery plugged into it just in case the power happens to go out. I don't know, something happens. It's still gonna be recording. So that's nice that you could do that in a studio environment. You could just plug it in straight to the wall, then you're good to go. Don't have to worry about wasting battery. Always nice to have the flexibility to be able to do that. So the next thing we're gonna talk about is the resolutions this camera shoots in. I've literally never took it out of 4K, so I don't even know how 1080 works. I don't know how 2K works. I've only shot in 4K in this camera, so that's all we're gonna talk about in this video. The 4K in this camera is phenomenal, and you're probably wondering, why am I sitting here talking about 4K? You know, because it's normal nowadays. Everybody shoots in 4K. A lot of you guys probably don't know, for television broadcasts, they don't accept 4K footage. They only accept 1080p footage. And I mean, I don't know how long it's gonna be that way, but they only accept 1080p footage. So shooting in 4K is such a big deal for me. So whenever I'm editing, I could frame up something any way I want in post-production. I have plenty of flexibility and the image is still gonna be really sharp and clean. So that's why 4K is so important to me. This camera shoots in 4K 24, 4K 30, and 4K 60. I mean, obviously I can't forget about the 4K 120. It shoots in 4K 120 without a crop at all, no crop on the lens. It also will shoot 4K 20 with audio as well, which the audio is recorded on a second SD card in the camera, but it records that audio if you need it. I guess since I just let you guys know about the second SD card, let's jump over to that feature of this camera and why it's so important to me. It has 2 SD card slots in this camera, which is amazing. You're probably wondering why that's so important. There's 2 reasons that most professionals love the fact that it has 2 SD card slots. One reason is so you could record your footage on 2 SD card slots at the same time. So if one card happens to corrupt, you have another copy. The peace of mind is always important. The second reason, when your one card fills up, you could jump onto the other card and continue filming. For me, it's the second reason. Most of my cards are brand new. I keep brand new cards. I actually buy the SanDisk V90 cards, 300 megabits a second. That's the ones I buy. I buy those because this camera requires them in the formats that this camera shoots in. You cannot shoot the 4K 120 with the V30 cards. You have to get the V90 SanDisk cards, and you can't get any card either. It has to be the SanDisk for some reason. I've tried the other cards. I will throw it up on the screen because I can't remember the name. These cards say they shoot fast enough, but they are complete trash. It will buffer the whole time. The only card that I've used with this camera that has no problems, I could shoot 4K 120 until the card's full, is the SanDisk V90 cards that I'm showing you right here on screen. These cards are amazing, and I do shoot a lot of slow motion. Sometimes I use the second card reader for just a slow motion card. I will put in a V30 for my regular footage with audio. I'll be filming, you know, long shots, long clips, and then when something happens and I want to switch over to slow motion, I will stop recording, switch over to the V90 card real quick because the button's really fast, and then I will just hit slow motion, which I have all my presets up. I have a button, hit the 12 button, it flips everything into slow motion. I turn my ND because I usually have to fix my ND, and then bam, I'm literally shooting in slow motion within 5 seconds of thinking I want to film in slow motion. I'm doing it on a different SD card, totally different setting within about 4 or 5 seconds. So that's another thing that's awesome about this camera, is you can set those buttons up to do what you want to do. So having 2 SD card readers or slots in this camera is great. I know a lot of cameras do have the 2 slots, but this being SD cards is just amazing to me. So all the things I mentioned in this video is not to tell you about the specs of this camera. It's honestly just to tell you how this camera has helped me get the job done better and more efficient than the other cameras I've used, like the Blackmagics that I used to have to use. Those cameras are not good. I mean, they're okay. Hold on, let me back up. They're good, But in my opinion, they're not near as good as the Canon C70s. They don't have the flexibility as the Canon C70s. So this video is not to tell you the spec of this camera, because most of you guys already know that. It's to tell you my experience with this camera. So with that, I'm gonna jump into one more thing, which is the dynamic range of this camera. And that's it, the video's done. Okay, so the last thing we're gonna talk about is the dynamic range of this camera. It has 16 stops of dynamic range. When I shoot everything in C-Log 2, ISO 800. I mean, I'm shooting everything outside, so there's the sun you gotta worry about. So I shoot everything at ISO 800, which gives you the full 16 stops dynamic range. So if you're shooting in here like I am, I'm at ISO 400 instead of 800, because there's really nothing that's gonna be blown out in this room. So I've dropped it to 400 because I don't need the full 16 stops of dynamic range. This camera, when you're shooting outside and you're in C-Log 2 and your exposure is set correctly, which this camera has a waveform monitor, which really helps you get your exposure right. It's so freaking cool. I've never shot with a camera that has a waveform monitor built in on it, and now with the new update that just came out, that waveform monitor is not bigger, but it's a lot more prominent. It's not as transparent, so you could see, I'm looking at it right now, you could see everything perfectly, and to make sure everything is exposed perfectly. So as long as your shot is exposed right, you're not gonna have anything blown out, and you're not gonna have anything underexposed. Your blacks aren't gonna be crushing with this camera. This camera is the best camera I've ever used when it comes to dynamic range. Honestly, the main reason why I bought this camera is not because of the resolution, it's not because of the frame rates. All that was a big plus, but it was honestly because of the dynamic range, because I shoot a lot of stuff outside. I shoot in a lot of weird situations, and this camera really helps bring out those situations to looking really good. I mean, you could shoot underexposed one stop, and this camera, you can bring it up and it's gonna be clean. This camera has the flexibility to do that. I don't know if it has a denoiser built in. I think I've heard that it did. I don't know, but I know that it looks amazing. So with that, that is all there is in this video. That is my experience with the Canon C70. I hope this video helped you. I hope it helped you make a decision. If you're looking into purchasing this camera, would I recommend purchasing this camera? Oh my God, definitely. It is, I mean, it's expensive, $5,500, but it's honestly the workhorse that you've been looking for. I promise you that. The footage is freaking phenomenal, and you won't have any complaints with this camera. It has every tool in the toolbox that you need. So with that, thanks for watching. Make sure you hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell notification button, and I will see you in the next video.